We are so excited to have one of our favorite guests, Robert Jobson, back on the show. He has written a new book that you listeners will love called Catherine, the Princess of Wales, which is the new definitive biography of her. It'll be out August 6th, and it is really a great read. As you'll probably remember from our previous interviews with him, Robert has been dubbed the godfather of royal reporting, and he is royal editor of the London Evening Standard. He's a royal commentator that has appeared on every news program you can think of, including as Good Morning America's royal commentator. And he's been at the forefront of royal reporting for well over 25 years.
Yeah,
Before
even more, I
writing,
think.
Yeah, even more than 25 years by now.
well, before writing about Catherine, he has written best-selling books about Princess Diana, King Charles, Prince Philip, and Prince William. So welcome back to the show. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Really a real honor to be back on.
Well, you write that when Kate Middleton was a child, becoming a princess would have been seen as very unlikely. So, why so? Take us back to the 1980s when she was born. Why was marrying a commoner not normalized really until Kate came along?
Well, I mean, first of all, there's nothing common about Kate. She's a really class act.
Sure.
But the reality is the way that the class system in the UK works. If you're not a noble or of royal blood, then you're called a commoner. And I suppose that's essentially what Kate is, because her parents are not noble birth, they're not gentry, they're not lords and ladies, or prince and princesses. So that's where it comes from, and that would have been practically been unheard of. I mean, the wedding of Charles and Diana, of course, happened in the early 80s, and the fact was Diana was the daughter of an earl. She was initially honourable, then Lady Diana Spencer. So that would have been the level that one would have expected. What is interesting is that in the 20th century and in the 21st century, we've seen a big change in the way princes have certainly fallen in love. We've now got a queen of we've got kings and queens that are married into other commoners in the Scandinavian royal family, and that Princess Mary, who was from Tasmania, her dad was a professor, fell in love with the Prince of Denmark, and now he's the Queen. So you've got others in Norway too. So the whole reality is it's changing, and even in Britain, in what was a very class-ridden society, it's certainly changing, and that's for the better. And that was really able, actually, if you go back in history, back to 1917, when George V changed the rulings, basically. So previous to that, royal princes of royal blood tended to marry or had to marry effectively what were Germanic or German princesses or other members of royal households across Europe. That all changed, and of course but they still were expected to marry nobles, daughters of earls, daughters of dukes, that type of thing. So it would have been early 1980, would have really been not even then not regarded as something that would happen, that a girl from the home counties playing Catherine Middleton, mum and dad worked for the British Airways or the BOAC. The reality is they would not have expected their daughter to marry a prince. Very, very unlikely.
Why is it so unique and important that William married for love and not for duty?
Well, I think actually I think that yes, he definitely did marry for love, but I think actually so did other members of the royal family. I think that the Queen did fall in love with Prince Philip. I think that Princess Diana did fall in love with Prince Charles, even if he was somewhat in love with somebody else. So the reality is that it's just the way that it sort of came about. It was through their own choice. I think that with the Queen and Prince Philip, where there's a lot of links there, that was something that was almost like an arranged marriage. They were second cousins. They were cousins. They were both related to Queen Victoria through their ancestry, but they were around. They were sort of introduced to each other in the right way, so therefore that love could develop. With William and with Catherine, it was a natural development. It wasn't something that person would be expected to be in the social circle. I think they'd met each other through the schools they went to. Catherine at Marlborough, William at Eton. So they hadn't met each other, which before they went to university. A lot of the stories are that they met at university. I think they'd bumped into each other. They'd met on the social circuit, and they were aware of each other even before they went to university.
Well, I still think about when you wrote your book about Prince William, you came on our show and you definitively cleared up the silly Rose Hambury rumors, like once and for all. I want you to clear up another rumor right now. But before I ask that question, I want to say that the level of detail in the book is extraordinary, right down to Kate's signature scent. So if you want to smell like Catherine, wear Joe Malone London Orange Blossom cologne. And this just the level of detail is extraordinary. But I want to clear this up once and for all. So let's dispute, as you write, this is from the book, erroneous reports surfaced suggesting that her change of heart, meaning to transfer from Edinburgh to St. Andrews to go to college, was solely influenced by William's decision to attend St. Andrews, and that somehow her mother had been involved in this process. Utter nonsense is how one source close to the family described that fanciful theory. So can we put the pin on this one for us? She went to St. Andrews because she wanted to go to St. Andrews, not because she was trying to become Princess of Wales or Queen someday.
Absolutely. I mean, the reality is, I think that when she left Marlborough, she was planning to go to Edinburgh. She'd got that organised through the, you go to an advisor. But then she realised, actually, she wanted to take a year out. She wanted to do expand her mind a bit. She wanted to go to Italy to study, and that's what she did. She went there on a year off, and then she did also go to South America, which is where William went as well, not at a different time, and did that, that course too. Then she went and worked on a sailing ship. So she did all sorts of things in that year that enabled her to expand her mind. She had different boyfriends at that time as well. So, and that, she got on very well with. So, to suggest that she was basically, there was this secret plan hatched to sort of ensnare a prince is nonsense. She went to St. Andrews because she liked the course. She was well up on the course. She'd researched it. And then when she did bump into William again at St. Andrews, they were both at St. Sally's, as they call it, the Halls of Residence there. She was quite embarrassed. She flushed red and walked away, So and also you've got to remember that she also started dating somebody else, Rupert Finch, who was, she's in that first year. So all of the suggestions that it was done in some sort of plan just doesn't, if you actually look at it, it doesn't wash. And also, I think that William also was dating another girl in his first year and his first terms at university. So they weren't free really anyway. So I do think that there's it's more than fanciful, and it fits maybe the crown, but it doesn't fit. Doesn't fit the true narrative, because
it's not reality.
The true narrative is, I think they became very firm friends before they became anything like any suggestion of any love affair between them. I think they were, as a lot of people do find at university, they would empathize with each other's issues. She was a great support to him as a friend. But during that time when he was having his university wobble, if you like, she was dating somebody else. So, it would be silly to suggest it had all been planned, organized by, Catherine's mother. It's a load of nonsense.
Well, as you've already revealed, this book is full of interesting details, but I want to ask you, what was the most interesting interview or piece of research that you gathered while writing this book?
Well, I mean, unlike a lot of these books, I think books do tend to now become, like almost like newspaper reports, the way that they're serialized or whatever. And to be honest with you, the book, I've wanted to get this book try to get a whole picture or a portrait of this woman as a whole. And I found by writing it as detailed as I could, there were nuggets in there which are different. That were not known. I mean, her father being ill, the fact that the king has ordered William to sign a declaration when he flies the helicopter with all the family in it. Yeah, there's some headline stories in there, but what I wanted was to create a picture of the woman and to get an overall sense of her. Now she's in her 40s. She's when I started writing the book, she was very active. She was out there trying to forge her own way in terms of what interests her and how she could make an influence on them, and was really establishing herself right at the center of the monarchy going forward. Because, you know, without her, this woman who's got a real closeness, a real connection with ordinary people, but her children are all born princes and princesses, a prince and princess and princess and a princess, and her husband's born to be king. Her father-in-law is the king. So she's surrounded by all these people that have lived pretty extraordinary lives, born into a system that makes it almost impossible for them to really understand what it's like to be an ordinary person. Yet she was the ordinary person. She was the girl that went to school, went to normal school. Yes, she went to paid schools, but she was the girl that went to work on a double-decker London bus. They've never experienced that, and I think that gives her a very important role in helping to ensure that the monarchy stays in touch with what society is like today.
Mm-hmm. Well, we were briefly talking in the pre-show about, anybody that knows anything about how long books take to write, you no doubt, and you confirmed this in the pre-show, but we'll talk about this in a second. You started writing this book long before 2024 and the roller coaster of a year this has been, especially with Kate and her health and her cancer diagnosis. So I think you said you started writing this in 2018, but then it got bifurcated by the Queen's death. And you wrote the book about King Charles, which we've had you on the show to talk about. So how did everything this year in 2024 affect your writing of this book? Because I imagine that you had to do a lot of quick changes at the end to update with obviously this major news about her life.
Yeah, of course, the book starts with the news of what happened. I mean, what I did originally, I went to see the publisher, the head of the UK publisher, Bonnier, who was Perminder Man, and I went there with my idea about the king. I wanted to. I'd written a book called The King at 70, and I wanted to update that because I knew, from my contacts, that the Queen was frail. It was getting frail, and I knew that I just sensed, given I've been covering royals for 30 odd years, I had a sense that there was a transition in it which was in the wind, and I just felt that I should be ahead of that curve. And I had a lot of new information about the king, and I wanted to write a definitive biography about him, which went on to be a bestseller, which was great. So I sat down with Perminder, and she is an incredible lady. Heads up CEO of Bonnie UK. And she said, "Look, I'm really interested in Kate," and I was like thinking, well, yeah, but I want to do this book on child. So there was this sort of run around the houses, but she said no. And so really, it was down to Perminder that wanted me to do the book on Kate because we'd had a success with the earlier Charles book. So I signed a deal way back. I think it might have been 2019, and started working on it and working on the history of Catherine, and also the title, the Princess of Wales. What fascinated me, of course, is that she was one day going to become the Princess of Wales, and that title we all wrestled with because of Diana. But then, then all of it, I was planning and writing and doing stuff. So I'd written probably a third, maybe more than that, of the book, and was doing quite a bit of research on Catherine. When I just felt, then my context said about the Charles story was going to take on a rapid change, and I went back to the publisher and said, "Look, I really think I have to focus on this," and they agreed. So I put the Kate. I got an extension of a year on the contract and put it to one side, which was fine because I was then able to write Our King and finish that book off with all the new detail in it. And of course, then because in that time Her Majesty sadly died, so that meant that I was in this position. And then, of course, I started to go back to the Catherine book, and then the dramatic, and so I was working it, and then the dramatic development started to happen at the beginning of the year. So that is why, in a way, I'm so pleased you've read it and like it. It gives a full picture rather than, if I'd started writing in January, it would have been just a rushed hatchet job, really. And there's no way you could get the detail or interview the people you wanted to interview. And I spoke to very close people in this one, and I'm so pleased I did, because I feel that the timing is everything, and it is really, without what's happened in Europe, for example. I mean, something like 20 different publishers have bought the rights to it in Europe, and they're translating it into 20 different languages, from Hungarian to Slovakian, Slovenian, Polish, Italian. So it's going to be, a big seller around Europe, because they will be
it's going to
into
be
it
a bombshell bestseller for sure.
But I've never experienced that before. That they all wanted to translate, and I think obviously that comes down to the shock of her sudden announcement that she was ill, and the realization of just how important she is to the modern monarchy and the modern royal family, that everyone seems to have realized since that shock announcement. And and when we saw her at Wimbledon a few days ago, looking so radiant, so lovely, it just reminded a lot of people, just how important she is. And certainly, I think that the whole story, just also of vulnerability of the royal family, also kicks in here with the king's illness too. So, look, I think timing is everything in these things, and I will be giving a proportion of the profits to cancer to the Bobby Moore Fund, actually.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Because I feel that's important anyway, but not because this is the book that's written as a result of that. It was in the planning and the writing long time ago, actually. Yeah.
I just have to say this really quickly. Imagine if you had written and published in like October 2023, right? Like how that you would feel. Anyway,
I would feel a bit. It wouldn't have been great. Yeah.
No.
Well, going back to your decision to write this book, we know it will do really, really well. You've already written about so many other royals, and there are other royals out there too that you have yet to write about. What's the reason you chose to really focus your gaze on Catherine this time around?
Well, I just, that whole concept really, that there she was, that she was. I mean, I was around as a journalist at the time of Princess Diana. I covered, I met Princess Diana, I spoke to her, knew her from the 1990s onwards. So I'm probably the only royal journalist, there's a few photographers, but the only royal journalist that was on the scene, that is still on the scene now. And so the whole concept of the wording of the Princess of Wales fascinated me. And in the book, I do know the different princesses of Wales over years. There's only been 10 or 11 actually, and 11 if you include Camilla, even though she was never known as the Princess of Wales, she did have the title. So that fascinated me as well. Everyone's saying, "Oh, she shouldn't even have the title, inherit the title because, Princess Diana." But I sort of wanted to explain historically that's nonsense. The Princess of Wales is a title that is for the wife of the Prince of Wales. It should that person get that title, and so that started me thinking. But also, I thought this is somebody that's going to play such an important role, has come from such a bit different background. And how on earth does she do it? How does she, she can barely, whenever she's in public, people scrutinize her like mad. And yet she manages to keep her cool. And she was never born to it. She was never trained to do it. It's a remarkable achievement for someone to remain that cool in the center of the storm, really, around her. And even when she was announced that she's sick, she does it with such courage and class, really, that I really think that she's somebody really special, and is going to play such an important role in the monarchy. I mean, at the moment we have a 76-year-old king, soon to be 76. And I mean, the king, over the next 10, 15 years, there's probably going to be another change at the top of monarchy. Not wishing anything to happen to the king, but it's possible that would happen. And Catherine, this girl from the Shires, this girl from an extraordinary background, is going to play a central focus role as being queen of the country, and will be the most famous person, woman, alongside the first ladies of America, but in the world, really. And I think that this person is going to be, given where she's come from, where her grandfather was a painter and decorator, he used to climb up his ladder and paint houses, and she's going to be the queen. I think that's quite an extraordinary rise, and an extraordinary And it's not so much the rise; it's the way she's able to carry this off with such poise, elegance, and class that I think really is quite extraordinary.
Well, I agree with you. And you write beautifully of William and Kate as a couple. They've been together for over 20 years, over half their lives at this point. And as you write, this is from the book, after 2 decades together, the last of that as a married couple, they are truly at one with each other. They enjoy the simple things such as chilling out on the sofa at home in comfy clothes, watching box sets such as Homeland and Game of Thrones when the kiddies are in bed. They would love to go to Glastonbury Festival and recalled one of the favorite concerts they attended was seeing the British rock band Coldplay, fronted by Chris Martin at Wembley Stadium. Even after all this time together, they still make each other laugh. And I think you spoke to this a minute ago, but they were friends first. They really established a foundation as friends before they ever fell in love. And I think that they're still best friends. I know that they're still best friends today. So before we talk about them professionally and their working role together, because of course they not only are in love and married, but they work together. Let's talk about them personally first. So, are they, I think I know the answer to this, but are they, in your estimation, as in love as ever, especially in light of this year's health crisis?
Oh, I think so. I mean, there's no doubt that William was absolutely crestfallen, not only at the news that his father was so
That's a
sick
lot. Yeah.
and the implications that had upon him, but then to learn his wife had to be treated for cancer too, devastated. I mean, he was, I think he really did. It was knocked off his perch for a while, and then. But you only have to look at the way that they look at each other. Look at the way William looks at his wife. I think he thinks he's lucky every time he sees her, and because he can't believe she's with him, and she's always laughing in his presence. She finds him very funny. And he's quite a dry sense of humour, and that's I think that shows. And when you see them up close, and he's about to deliver a speech, maybe a little bit nervous, she's there very much encouraging him, and you know that they would have talked over the speech, they would have discussed the implications, and he's there just as much to support her. I think going forward they'll do more things on their own, and follow agendas that are separate. And like the Prince has been covering the Earthshot Prize, and initially it was great to have her alongside him in a green dress, whatever. He sort of doesn't need that anymore, and I think that she, with her young pursuit for the men to secure, make sure young people have the best environments to grow up, especially the under fives. That's something that she's really thrown herself into. So I think they have got their separate areas that they can get involved with, but they are very much a supportive couple, and you can see as king and queen, when they become king and queen, there'll be very much a partnership in that role, because whilst William will take the lead role, he will always need her advice and guidance, as Queen Elizabeth said she did of Prince Philip.
Well, actually, I want to talk about that for a second. So, professionally, you say even today, William always consults his wife as well as his chief advisors before making big decisions. They operate as a true partnership, knowing that what one does impacts the other. He clearly values her opinion, candor, and honest guidance. In public, she's often seen subtly encouraging him before he delivers a speech with a loving smile or gentle touch on the arm. And they are without a doubt a tour de force in royal teamwork and present themselves as such in public. So let's talk about them as king and queen for a second. How will they operate as a team when they are in that role?
I think the one thing about being king and queen is it's so much more defined in terms of the constitution and the way things can act, because you're intrinsically linked with government. So your speeches have really been written for you. They're cleared by government much more than you're freer to do a lot more things as Prince of Wales, which seems strange, but it's the truth. And so there'll be more. It'll be more regimented. Their programs will be more controlled by the governments that they're in Australia or New Zealand or other realms, that will be controlled by them. So in a way, actually, this is their freest time. And what I found very interesting, actually, is that they've very much put their family right at the heart of everything. They give enough in terms of photograph opportunities, as we've seen with William in going with his taking his son George to football, or Catherine taking with her sister taking little Charlotte to the tennis. So we've seen that happening and unfolding already. But I think that they would focus more on their family and put their family first, whilst working around not doing so many engagements, but maybe higher quality engagements, bigger situations such as Earthshot, or bigger announcements that they're making and working with charitable organisations. So I think that they've handled that bit of it quite well, and I think in that respect they get the support of the king, because he realizes that once they become king and queen, their privacy, their complete freedom is over, and you are controlled more and more by the state.
Well, as we start to close our time together, as her biographer, what do you wish more people knew about Catherine but don't, at least until they read your book? And how would you, this is kind of a two-parter, how would you describe the woman Catherine is today? Not the princess, because we see that, but the person, the human being. Who is she at her core? So A, what do you wish more people knew about her, and how is she really at home and when the cameras are off of her?
She has a great sense of humour. It's a great mum. I think the most important thing that probably people forget is how smart she is. A very intelligent person. When she went to Boston and went to Harvard, there met a load of professors to do with early learning. They were all
I was
quite,
in that room, Robert, and I can
yeah,
confirm that she went toe to toe with
taken
him.
aback. Yeah, she went toe to toe with them, and I think they were quite taken aback. Whether if they thought they were going to give platitudes, they weren't. And I think most people accepted that she could, if she wanted to, could walk away and do a PhD on this very subject.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one thing. Her smartness is and sharpness is something that people probably don't necessarily forget, because she's such a smiley, happy faced person. But I think it's that courage and that grit that people have actually seen more. When that video was shown, it was heartbreaking, I thought, when she declared she had the courage to announce that the way she did, and she had to look down a couple of times when she mentioned the children. It was very emotional, very moving, and I think that took real courage to do that. And I think that is what people probably didn't realize about her until this befell her. And I think maybe even the other people that thought she knew her quite well didn't realize just how much courage she has. I mean, things that she's done. She has the ability to play like a piano in Mr. Abbey the way she
Right.
did at that event. And really, when other people would sit there and you get all the trolls saying, "Oh, she's not even playing; it's fake." She doesn't pay a blind bit of notice to that. She gets out there and does things and makes a difference. All the mental health things that they did with, which they did with both William and Harry, she took the lead in that. And I think that a lot of people think that she may be, she's what she described almost as a Stratford wife. What nonsense! This is a very smart, modern woman of the 21st century who is really in tune with what she wants for her family, what she wants for her husband, but also how she can make a difference and use her fame and celebrity to improve the lives of others. And I think that needs to be commended.
Well, talking just a little bit more about her as a person, I really want to know, when she is at her happiest, what is she doing? Who is she with? Where is she? Tell us a little bit about what really makes her happy.
I think that it's the simple things, especially since the illness. She loves to be outdoors. She loves to be with nature. That photograph of her with that standing by that tree, I think, summed it up. But another one, a picture that she took of her family jumping off from a sand dune while she were out at Norfolk, kicking off their shoes, wandering on the beach with the family, having a picnic on the beach, where a lot of people surprisingly just leave them alone up in Norfolk. And it's that's, I think, where she's at most happy, where she's just at one with nature, with her husband and her family. It may sound a little dull to some people, but it's a beautiful thing, and I think to have that core sense of family and trust and belief is something that is so central to her as a person.
Well, our last question for you, she has plenty of life left to live. She's prayerfully only halfway through it. But heretofore, what is Kate's legacy? What impact has she made? How has she made the world a bit better because she was here? And how will she continue to do so?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember with Britain as an hereditary monarchy, I think that she is part of a great double act that has secured that monarchy going forward, because there's been a few wobbles, haven't there? Let's be honest with the
Sure. Yeah.
Harry and Meghan scenario. We've had all sorts of things and mudslinging and bad things going on. We've had the loss of a queen who was so part of our DNA, and then you've got to then accept the transition to a new king, and that's gone well. But she, in my view, is part of that acceptance, because people look to the future, look to someone like her who supports and keeps all of them together. So I think that she is at the core of making sure the monarchy in the 21st century survives. And remember, one of the most important jobs is to be preparing both all her children for what they've got to do in public service, but primarily Prince George, the role that he will have towards the latter, the second half of the 21st century.
Well, this is such a great read. What a time, right, to be writing her biography. Listeners, the book is called Catherine, the Princess of Wales. It is out on August 6th. I think it's already a bestseller in pre-orders. It will no doubt be a massive bestseller, just like all of your other royal family books. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yes, thank
Always
you.
always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.